Welcome to the Lobster Talks podcast by Lobster Capital, where we celebrate the bold thinkers and innovators driving change in the startup world. I'm your host, Gabriel Jarrosson, and today I'm thrilled to have Matt Gialich. He's the CEO of AstroForge. He's a company mining asteroids. Matt, thank you for being here on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You've heard this right. He's mining asteroids. Please, let's dive right in. It's so fascinating. Could you introduce yourself and let's talk about this. How did you come up with this idea? So let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm obviously the founder and CEO of AstroForge. We are an asteroid mining company. Our mission is to go out and mine what are called metallic asteroids for the platinum group metals. In fact, I have one on my desk always, which I think you have to do, right? Here's an example. This is obviously a meteorite because it hit the Earth, but this is one of those metallic asteroids that we want to go target in space and mine them for the precious metals. So lots of fun. Lots of big ideas, but lots of execution we have to do, right? Later this year, scheduled right now for November, we will launch what will be the world's first commercial deep space mission out to an asteroid and identify one of these metallic asteroids flying around us in space.
It's insane. Oh my God, I'm so excited. So first thing, what do we do with it? Of course, we're going to talk about how you get there, but once we get the metal, what do we use them for? And of course, I'm thinking either you bring them back to Earth, but also you could build directly in space. Which one are you favoring right now? What's your end goal in there?
I love the concepts of building directly in space. And I think there's a lot of really cool ideas of what you can do with space resources as you go forward and kind of this future world we can create. But I also think that world's pretty far away and something that while we'd love to execute on in the future is not something we can build a business around today. So we're very focused on the precious metal markets here on Earth. Very quantifiable markets, right? They're traded in London twice a day on the commodities exchange. We know exactly what that market looks like and what we can go into and also who we can sell to. It allows us to have some customers. It allows us to have some traction. It allows us to have a real return on investment, which I think is critical to every company at this stage going into. So to answer your question in short, we're focused on the Earth markets as of right now.
For now. Okay. Of course, once we get to building directly in space, it's also fascinating and we could talk a lot about that, but let's talk about the real business. So walk us through how it works. You send a robot to Earth, it flies to an asteroid, lands on it, and mines it, basically?
Essentially, it's a pretty simple concept, right? We travel out to these asteroids, we land on them, we refine it into the platinum group metals. So we do the mining on site, and then we come back to Earth and recover the metal. It's a pretty easy to understand construct of how we go about asteroid mining. Keep in mind, there's been missions that have done something very similar before. So we have Hayabusa missions, the OSIRIS-REx missions, which went out to asteroids, took samples from them and brought them back to Earth. This is not a new concept. This is not something I came up with and nobody else has thought about, right? This has been thought about for a long time. And really, we just want to be the first ones that go make a commercially viable plan and can execute on it.
How did you get the first idea? So it's been done before, right? You didn't invent the concept. But what was the path, the journey to say, well, I'm going to be the guy who does this now?
I think this is this notion that I hear people ask me this all the time when they want to start a company, well, I don't have an idea, or I didn't wake up and find something I'm super passionate about. And the reality is, neither did I. You don't wake up one day and just go yeah, what if we could mine asteroids? No, it's not at all how this works, right? You start off and it's a long-winded story of construction, how we thought about this. Really the first time this was ever noticed was kind of on two fronts. I was working at the time at Bird Rides, which is a scooter company based here in LA. And during that time, we had a delay in a small microchip called an STM32. And that delay was caused, number one, by COVID, but mainly what the delay was caused by was the non-availability of platinum in the construction of the chip. That was what COVID actually slowed down. And so it was the first time that I was made aware that platinum was used in chips, by the way. You just never think of this, but it got me on this little bit of a roadmap of looking at precious metals and metals as a whole and their actual, not store of wealth, but manufacturing use cases and what that looks like. And when you start to look at that, you realize very soon, there's some massive problems there. We don't have any in the borders of the United States, right? This is almost all owned by third world countries, or different countries, I should say, like China, Russia, and South Africa. We don't have the availability we need of these materials going forward, and their growth rates are so high that we're going to run out of them very soon. So what do we do? Well, but then after that, you look at it and you go, okay, cool, we could start a mine or something. It's not really that exciting. I actually looked at ore concentrations and realized, well, there's not a lot of ore that we have. There's not a lot left. The theory of it's from asteroids, blah, blah, blah. We know this. Who cares? Then I got a job offer from the Jet Propulsion Lab. And I got a job offer to go work on a mission called Europa Clipper. It's a $4.5 billion mission that'll go out to Europa. Really, really cool fucking mission, right? Like really scientific, really awesome. But it was also going to take 32 years, cost so much money, and just, be this huge government overhead project that I wasn't ready for. I said, this is not really the life I want to live. And I remember telling my wife, like, should I take this job at JPL? And she told me it was joking. I don't know. She said, if you take the job, I'm divorcing you. And I get it. She knew me, and she knew that if I went there and worked there for 6 months, I'd just quit because it wouldn't be any fun. I would be, it'd be great for 6 months, and then I'd say, like, I'm bored. Let's go do something different. And so it wasn't until later that I put kind of both these ideas together and said, hold on, there's this huge problem with going to deep space. What if we could make it a lot cheaper? What if we could look at this like Elon looked at Falcon 1? What if we could just start from square one and kind of assess how much this shit costs as opposed to what we'd actually make of it, get rid of all the government overhead, take a little bit more risk. What could we do, and could we make it economically viable? I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And the conclusion I came to was, I'm not sure, but let's go try, right? And we kind of jumped off the deep end. Me and Jose decided to give it a shot. We announced the company formation the day we started Y Combinator, and we were off to the races. I mean, that's it. Realistically, for the first month, we just spent every day trying to prove ourselves wrong and say, like, are we idiots? Like, we know we're idiots, but are we truly idiots when it comes to this? What do we got to do? And we just focused on, are we wrong? Are we wrong? And when we couldn't figure out that we were grossly wrong on anything, we said, cool, let's keep going and see what we can do. And brings you to today.
Wow, that's insane. When did you start?
We started January 10th, 2022.
Okay, so you're basically 2-year-old company. One of the first things that jumps to my mind is you probably have absolutely amazing, fantastic investors, but they're probably specific investors because most people would be either too scared or they would want to see revenue, earlier. It is a big bet and it's a long-term bet. Did you scare off a lot of investors? Was it super hard to raise, or was it, to the contrary, super easy? Because for a lot of people, including myself, it's so exciting. For investors specifically, what was the journey like for you?
I think every round has been different. Every time we've gone out to raise has been different, right? And that's the best way to say it. I think that what are you trying to do in VC, right? I mean, VC is pretty clear. You're trying to get a fund math that will allow fund return within some kind of time frame that you've constructed. And the incentive on the venture side is to have enough IRR that you can raise the next fund, right? That is the incentive of venture. So you can like an idea as much as you want, but the math has to work out. And like at the end of the day, it's a math equation. And the one thing I love about venture is that all the tertiary things we love to add to it, with your fund, it's a YC focused fund. With whatever else you want to invest in a certain type of founder or a certain region or whatever, none of that matters. What matters is a math equation. That's it. And if you can't return the fund, nobody gives a shit. And so, your job number one when you go out to raise money is to make sure that you can answer that question. And so for us, that means we need to go extremely fast and we need to have extremely outsized return for the risk you're taking. And that risk adjusted return better mean that you're making a lot of money. And I think at different stages that changes as we go forward, but keeping in constant that speed is king, because at the end of the day, making sure we can either prove we're a great company or we're a total dud, we need to get to that answer as quick as possible. And so that's what we lean on. And look, the investment's going to come or it's not, but it actually doesn't, it matters to me because that's how my company survives. But at the end of the day, like, it is what it is. We've made our bed, we're going to lay in it. And our thesis is go as fast as humanly possible, see if we can prove out these milestones and see if we're wrong.
No, I love that. And I agree with you that whatever fluff you put around your fund, your YC fund, your blah, 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 it doesn't matter. What matters is the performance. That's why I chose to invest in YC only, is because I think it's going to improve the performance. And I agree with you as well. At the end of the day, the fund is going to decide to invest in you if you show them a lot of returns. And so it's also very, it's the spirit of Silicon Valley, taking super big risks for very, very big return. Just so it's very clear for everyone here listening to us, what types of returns are we talking about? I'm guessing you could mine tons and tons and tons of precious metals every week, every year, and make gigantic profits. How do you get investors excited? How gigantic is it? And is it bigger than any other types of startups?
I mean, I think you're talking to what potentially has, and this isn't coming from me, this has come from multiple other people. This potentially could be the largest company ever created. We really want to control resources worldwide and understand on certain resources that meet a monetary threshold, we can make a huge influx in how we do mining, right? And our mission is to revolutionize mining. It's a destructive process, causes a ton of pollution, Hundreds of people die every year. You get a lot of water waste, and you're just digging big ass holes in the ground that are big toxic pits. What if we didn't have to do that? What if we could still maintain our way of life, but without the damaging principles that come behind it? That's what AstroForge unlocks. And I think whenever we look at climate change as a whole, we always look at it as an or. Either you drive your car every day or you walk. One pollutes, one doesn't. And that's obviously a really, really stupid example and a really easy example. But what if we didn't have to do that? What if we could say we could have the same materials and be cleaner? And I think AstroForge is one of those rare companies that's ever been devised that allows you to do that, allows you to have a better economic impact on the world, a much cleaner economic impact on the world, and at the same time still maintain our way of life and not ask every human being to make massive sacrifices in their daily belongings.
That's awesome. I believe, just like you, that technology is the answer. I actually personally believe that climate change is a real huge threat, but I'm so optimistic into the future that I'm pretty sure we're going to find a solution and we're going to figure it out. And probably in 50 years or maybe 100 years, it's going to be a big nothing burger because we're like, you can just pollute and we'll just capture the CO2 from the atmosphere. That's not a problem. Whatever the solution is going to be, I'm very positive that it's going to come from technology, and that's exactly what you're doing. So you mentioned doing things sort of the Elon Musk way, which is obviously when you're in space, seems super smart. And I'm actually just currently right now reading his biography from Walter Isaacson that was published last year. He talks about the idiot rule. Idiot rule is when the difference between the price of the materials of a piece and the price of what they sell it to you for. And if you just, take a lot of things off, a lot of regulation, a lot of this is the old way we do stuff, you can start from the ground up and build your thing. Is this what you're trying to do, the kind of same approach with the idiot rule from Elon Musk?
I would say that in a different way, yes, but it's on a much, much higher level. Of course, I think anybody would be stupid to not look at what a government is doing that's iterated on something for 50 years and say, how much of this can we remove and how can we do it better? That's exactly what we do. We go through that in big level. We look at what problems do we actually see in testing or have we seen before? What do we need to go into testing on? How to remove? But cost is the number one driver to any business, right? Like you have to think cheap and you have to think low cost, and that's it. And so I don't think this is a rule that Elon invented. I think it's a rule that Elon perfected as we went forward. But like cost is king, right? You have to be a profitable business as you go forward. And for us, we fall into that same rule. We still have to be able to make spacecraft at a certain cost threshold to make these missions have high margin, which is what we want to go into it with. It does no good to build $1 billion spacecraft. That's never going to work for asteroid mining. So you have to think differently. And a lot of the way you do that is exactly that. Go back to how much raw materials and challenge everything. When someone says they're going to charge you X amount of dollars for some special coating, how much does it cost to do it ourselves? Do we need the coating? Where do we go with it, right? It's all these kind of questions and things that we're constantly looking at. And that's really every founder's job. Your job as a founder is to control costs and to make sure that your team is going after the right incentive base, which is to increase the enterprise value of the company, not to lower their risk, because human nature, especially when it comes to space, is that the individual wants to lower their risk and not be scared that their product or what they worked on is going to fail. In fact, if you ask multiple engineers, if you go to JPL and ask engineers, you go ask the thermal team, they'll say like, oh, we don't think thermal is going to fail. If it fails, it'll be because of propulsion. And propulsion will say, oh, it's going to fail because of avionics. And that's how they think. And that's how human nature allows you to think. That's not acceptable to me, right? And I tell everybody at the company, if you're not scared as shit when we launch this rocket, when we launch our spacecraft, you went too slow. We have to rely on speed. We have to rely on enterprise value. And you have to trade that for risk you're willing to take on an individual level.
It's exactly the question I wanted to ask you about speed. You've mentioned it now twice that you want to go so fast. There's one thing that I've heard time and time and time again. Why YC is so effective with startups is because it imprints in you a sense of urgency, because it's only 3 months and you have all those meetings and you see all of those other batchmates every day or every week and you see their progress and you're thinking, oh my God, I need to launch. And then I've also heard a lot of startups that struggle to maintain the same momentum after YC because you don't have the same, environment, even though many of them try to replicate it and still meet. So I want to ask you, and I'm a big believer as well, that speed is of the essence in many, many things in business. How do you do that? What's the secret sauce of just keeping speed as a number one value with your employees on the long term? Like it's been already 2 years. How do you actually do that?
It's the answer probably a lot of people don't want to hear, but it's really easy. You're the leader of a company, you go fast. And if people aren't willing to go fast, then they don't work here anymore. It's pretty simple. right? Like at the end of the day, you control who you bring on, you control the types of people you bring on, and you have to make sure those people align with the value. I also say this, I think one of the things you see at YC is a lot of people think that getting into YC is the actual victory. And that what comes after that, they allow themselves to take a step back or not do it. Me and Jose had a superpower here is that we're complete idiots. And we didn't even know, like, I'd never even heard of YC before I applied to it. Had no idea what I was even applying to. Thought like, are these terms even good? Should I even be doing this? This is a scam. So we had none of like the understanding of what YC is, which meant we had none of the preconceived notion that like we've been successful or anything like that. So we went into it being like, cool, this is what we're going to do with our company. Let's see how they can help us. And it ended up being a massive superpower to the point where when YC stopped for us, it didn't really affect the company at all. It was kind of the same thing. And so that's how we treated it. And I think that's how all founders should treat it is if you start going slow, either stop your company and just go bankrupt because that's what you deserve to do, or fix it. I mean, those are your two options. Or you could sit there in this kind of in-between world for a long time and be a zombie startup, which we see all the time. And I'm just not interested in wasting my time. AstroForge is either going to mine an asteroid or we're going to go bankrupt. And those are our two outcomes. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward.
Thank you for that answer. It's fascinating. Basically, there's no secret. You go fast because you go fast, and that's it. I love that. I want to go back to sort of the actual mission. You can answer with what you know right now, and I'm guessing your answer in 2 years is probably different, but what's the hardest part in all of this? Is it building the robot? You're launching it? Is it landing? Is it bringing the metals back? Like, what's the really, really hard part? Because like you said, it's been done before, but it's not like you're mining asteroids every minute as we're talking right now. It's still very, very difficult. It's been 2 years. What's the hardest?
Hardest part is raising money. And it is for any deep tech company, right? Like, put it this way, we can make every technical misstep along the way and still have a company if we had unlimited money. But if we run out of money, it doesn't matter how good we are, we don't have a business. So at some point, every deep tech founder has the same problem, which is you have to be able to raise money. And if you can't raise money, nothing else matters. After that, the hardest risk for us is really the only piece that hasn't been done, the refinery. Can we make that refinery work in space at the correct power requirements that we need to get the right material removal rates on the right type of asteroid surfaces? That's what we have to keep protecting, keep working on every single day. And that's where we spend a lot of capital allocation, right? That's a big part of this company is making sure that refinery is efficient, works well, does what it needs to do, can be tested, because that is the only piece that hasn't been done before. Other than that, it's just fucking execution. Team has to work hard. You got to put a lot of work into these kind of things, but there's no secret. There's no secret to what we have to do. It's the same way when Elon built Falcon 1. Everybody knew how to build a rocket. In fact, there was a whole bunch of people you could take from Boeing or from Lockheed that knew how to build a rocket. There was never a question there. It was, could Elon raise enough money? And could the team actually execute to build the rocket? That was the question. It's the same thing for us.
And the refiner is extracting the metal and having it in its pure form so that you can send it back, correct?
Yes, the refinery takes that metallic asteroid and turns it into something that's worth a lot of money. So we actually only bring back what's worth a lot of money.
Wow. Yeah, this hasn't been done. And so I don't know what you can share. How far along are you with that?
We're very far along with that. I'm not willing to share a lot on it. It's obviously held very close to the chest of the company. We're very secretive of it, but we have essentially accomplished what we set out to do with the refinery. And that gives us a huge advantage as we go forward.
That's awesome. Congrats. I love that. And then I'm guessing, what's the size of the, because, the gold mine is you land on an asteroid that's, this size of a whatever country, a huge thing with a lot of metal, but then you're limited with the payload that you're able to send. It's only a couple tons maximum. And that's not only mining, there's propulsion and whatever and refining. If you land a jackpot asteroid, but it's going to only, orbit close to Earth for a short time and leave, you don't have time to mine everything. Is that something you're already thinking about, or it's too far along into the future?
Yeah, I'll say this differently. Look, like we have Halley's Comet, comes around once every 75 years. If Halley's Comet was made out of gold, I don't care. It's not viable as a business model, right? And so when we go after target selection and we look at these asteroids, we go through a whole list of criteria of what they have to do to become viable. And I think that's a key piece of what we do. I mean, the target selection is something, again, not something that we're secretive about, but something we do hold close to the chest until we're ready to announce which asteroid we're going to be going to. And it has to meet, about 20 different criteria to make sure it's viable to go to and that we think it's highly likely to be something that can be worth a lot of money when we extract the material out of it. But let's try to understand here that there was a paper that came out or an article that came out that said there's an asteroid worth like 10,000 quadrillion dollars. And I never understood this because also Mars is worth 10 billion, quadrillion, trillion dollars. Like, who cares? It's not really important. What matters to us is quality, right? How much of these materials that are worth a lot to us on Earth are at a very high concentration on these asteroids. And so what I care about is not necessarily size or how much is there, but what is the ore quality? And that is what we're going after. And that's what we're trying to target.
And yeah, like you said, if it's worth quadrillions of gazillions or whatever, but you can't mine it, then whatever. But I'm thinking now, if the Halley's Comet comes every 75 years, because you're also a long-term thinking company, you could send your mining robots and then wait for 75 years. When it comes back, that's jackpot. I mean, for your successor, the next CEO of the company, you're not there yet. Obviously, you want to make profits, not in 75 years, but that could be interesting.
And I want to think about speed, and speed does not equate to doing 100-year missions, right? So to me, it's not interesting, and we won't even look at it. And I think it's kind of one of these things that for us at this point in the company is not something we think about. There's probably a time in the company when we are so successful that we need to be thinking about those long-term missions and, have 20-year roadmaps and all that. I'll fire myself as CEO, and somebody who cares about that can take over, because that's not interesting to me, right? The goal here right now is go as fast as humanly possible to mine an asteroid. After that, I'll probably hire somebody out of Harvard that knows what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's awesome. And then in terms of hiring, but I'm thinking about the question, but I'm thinking maybe it's sort of similar with the investor question. You're hiring some people who are really passionate about this. Is it harder for you being, pre-launch, pre-revenue, or is it easier for you because it's such a cool concept? What have you experienced in that aspect?
I think any company that starts making more and more progress, hiring becomes more and more easier, right? So at the beginning, it was very difficult. As it goes along, it becomes much easier. The nice thing about a company like ours is, it's really easy to check for passion. People either give a shit about this or they don't. And the ones that don't either don't last here very long or never get hired. And the ones that do are kind of here for life. And that's what you want, right? You want people that deeply care about what the company is building and what they're doing. And we share that ownership in the company with everybody. I really pride this company on everybody having some piece of the company as they go forward and feeling ownership. So if the company is super successful, they're also rewarded in a monetary way, even though a lot of engineers don't ask for that, right? It's very different than kind of like the Silicon Valley ethos. Like, a lot of people don't understand stock and options and these kind of things. But it's what we do, and it's a big part of how we build the company and a big part of who we hire.
It's not a zero-sum game. It's always positive to share into the wins and everybody. So let's talk about the launch coming up in November. Maybe this, I'm guessing you can tell us a little bit more about, because you very, very briefly mentioned it. What's happening in November exactly? What are you testing? What are you doing?
In November, we're going out to an asteroid, right? So we're launching the first commercial deep space mission to an asteroid. I think it's going to be a monumental mission from a history standpoint. We're going to do something never before done. And our goal is to get out to one of these metallic asteroids. First, I should say, our goal is to get to deep space. No commercial companies made it to deep space as a mission. Like, Elon shot his Tesla off into deep space, and that was pretty fucking cool. But it wasn't a mission, right? It was kind of like a launch it and forget it. So we want to be the first company to really operate in deep space, run a mission in deep space, make sure we can do that, and really test the spacecraft. That's the primary objective of this mission. Secondary objective is, can we find the asteroid, lock onto it, and get some of these high-res, beautiful pictures of what we believe to be a metallic asteroid, right? We want to prove that we found the right asteroid type in the right orbit and really identify one of these key targets as we go forward. And it's pretty cool that we get a shot on goal to do this. This is still going to be a high-risk mission. Everything we're doing here is, we come with a lot of experience across the company. A lot of us have built spacecraft before, built rockets before, understand space. Space is unforgiving. Space is challenging. Space is something that, for the cost you put into it, the testability is very difficult to get across. But we got a shot on goal to make it happen. And if we make it happen, and if we get all the way there, I think we revolutionize the way that we explore the universe and the way that we can see into the future. And I think long term, hopefully we can be part of the people that answer some of those questions we've all wondered about since we were born, right? Why are we here? Are other people here? And really think about space exploration in a new light. That's the door we hope to open in November.
So you found already the asteroid? You know which one it is, I'm guessing already.
We have a target list of multiple asteroids, and we're continuing to collect images and scientific data before we get it right down to which one. We obviously have our top target, and it goes down from there. Yeah. But we're constantly ranking them. It's like the NBA's like top 100 players, right? And we kind of keep going through. And so that's how we think about it.
Okay. And then you get pictures. You're not mining it yet on that mission, correct?
No, this mission is to prove that we found one of these metallic asteroids.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'll be following very, very closely. And obviously, best of luck. Are you launching from SpaceX to make it go full circle?
So we launched from Cape Canaveral in Florida. We will be on a Falcon 9 that is owned by a company called Intuitive Machines. That launch is going to the moon. So we'll be launching on a trajectory called translunar injection. We'll go out to the moon and we'll deploy from there, and then we'll slingshot around the moon and go out to the asteroid. So very different than your kind of standard launch that you see a Falcon do, which makes it a lot more fun.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. Very, very cool. No, that's absolutely brilliant. Again, just so exciting. I have so many questions around, the cost, and I'm guessing we don't get to talk about that, how much you're spending to send that, to get those pictures. But it's too bad. After the podcast, maybe I can ask you about that. With the facts, what time do you spend fundraising? What time do you spend running the company? Because you said your main job and your main difficulty is fundraising. Do you see yourself as a fundraiser, or do you see yourself as a builder and space explorer, etc.?
I don't think you can ever draw a delineation there. Like, you can't fundraise unless you have intimate knowledge of the business, and you can't have infinite knowledge of the business or intimate knowledge of the business unless you understand how much capital you have to allocate into what projects. So it's not really one or the other. I mean, look, I have a great co-founder in Jose who is awesome and can execute here on the satellite building and all of that at all times. I'm responsible for the company at the end of the day, and that's it. And so at the time, you have to put in the extra hours to make sure you understand every facet of what the company is working on, where the real problems are, where the perceived problems are, how you get ahead of all of it, what you think is the highest risk. Like, running a company is not for the faint of heart. It's not an easy job.
For sure.
And so I don't think you can say you can do one or the other. You have to do everything, and you have to do everything well. And if you don't, you get your answer very soon because you have a bankrupt company.
So as you know, we've talked about it. I only invest in YC. I believe it's going to get me a better performance. We've covered that. And you also mentioned that you didn't know anything about YC before applying, which is sort of very cool and refreshing, because everybody knows YC now, and it's not always for the best. So I want to ask you, what's your biggest takeaway from YC? What did you really get from there? Is it the speed? Because we've talked about it and we know YC has it. I'm guessing you had that in you before, probably. What did you get mostly from YC then?
I think what YC does a really good job at teaching you is all the tertiary things of running a company. What kind of company to form, how to run a fundraising process, how to think about investors, how investors think, and how to go through it. YC gives generalized advice for the whole group, but you get your batch partners and, selecting those group partners to be of the highest quality, which I think they're all high quality. I don't mean in any way to say none of them aren't, but, ours were Michael Seibold and Brad Flora. And those two were kind of fundamental in how we thought about the company. In fact, Michael Seibold gave me some of the best advice I'd ever got multiple times, and really was kind of instrumental in us being successful as a company. And maybe not for all the reasons you think. Sometimes the hardest part of running a company is just, for lack of a better term, like not being a bitch. These companies are hard and they're really tough, and you're going to have lots of ups and downs. And you just got to be reminded that as soon as you want to go into complainer mode and say like, woe is me, you got to have somebody that like slaps you in the face and says, suck it up and figure it out, because nobody gives a shit. And like, that's a very important trait to learn as a founder. And if you don't learn it, I mean, you'll see it all the day when you're talking to any companies, whether they're YC or not, you see this. And one direct correlation I can make to founder outcomes is those who complain and those who just fix. And, YC does a really good job at reminding you of why you did this and why you're there, and not giving into the kind of human nature of what was me, for lack of a better term.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that. It's, first of all, I hear so many entrepreneurs praising Michael. I mean, it's insane how instrumental he is to YC. So, congratulations to him. And it's great that you had him in your corner. And also, I've heard on a podcast, I don't remember which group partner it was. Maybe it was Jared. I don't remember. But he said, basically, it's crazy. What we do at YC is we don't tell them some crazy secret techniques of growth or whatever. We just tell them basic stuff like don't die, keep your head up, and like you said, fix stuff. And it, to our listeners, it might sound, oh, that's so simple, like don't complain and fix stuff. But it actually, when you're running, when you're running your business on a daily basis for weeks and months and years, you do run into problems and walls, and you do want to complain. And so it's those quote unquote so simple advice and concepts, actually being reminded of them consistently by some authority figures really goes a long way. And it's not the first time you just confirm what I've heard multiple times. Even if you're not going through YC, if you can get someone to do this for you, just to keep encouraging you and giving you the basic stuff, I think that goes a really, really long way.
It's just human nature is to pretend that problems exist that don't exist. And you hear this all the time. And people will go off and say, my company doesn't work because of this, or my product's not working because of this, or whatever. And YC's advice, and I think this is very much the right advice for most entrepreneurs, is, did you talk to your customers? Like, stop having opinions. Nobody cares what you think. Nobody cares what I think about the design or what color this is, or if the UI is wrong. Talk to the people who are going to pay you. Care about what matters. And that's it. And if you just tell sometimes founders, if I could just put on repeat for founders every once in an hour, I'd say, like, talk to your customers and actually do that. And then you see this at like the extreme level. So this guy, Wassemer, who runs Pilot, we use Pilot. This dude emails me every 6 months as the CEO of a company that's raised like, I don't know, $1 billion and says like, hey, can we hop on a call so I can understand what your problems are? Like, that is the level of dedication you need to have to be a founder. It doesn't matter how rich you think you are, how big your house is, how nice your car is. You got to call the entry-level guys and say, what is going on? What is your problem? And how do I solve it?
Last thing I want to ask you, is there a book or a quote that still has a significant impact on your life?
No.
Really? Explain, please.
I just don't, like, none of these things have a significant impact, because that would mean I iterate towards one solution instead of understanding my own. And I think it's very easy for people to iterate towards an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs and make conclusions that that's who they are and they can perform at the same levels or the same way. The reality is, I love the product Steve Jobs was able to make. But I'm hopefully self-aware enough to know that if I was in Steve Jobs' situation or looking at him, I would have not done it. When Elon said he was going to land rockets and make them reusable, I did some basic math using the rocket equation and said, this is stupid. You're going to throw away 25% of the mass of the rocket. This makes no sense. I was wrong. So for me to over-index on one of these great founders and say that's how I would run a company is completely idiotic, I think. And so instead, what I do is I very much study a lot of founders and try to understand correlations between who's been successful and who hasn't in what situations and at what times in the world. Because the reality is, being a founder in 1930s Depression USA, as opposed to 1998 Silicon Valley, are two very different styles of founders. And, as you go through a company, you'll have very lucrative times and very non-lucrative times. You got to be able to iterate and think quickly in both. And so saying that I picked one of those and that's how I live my life, I think is incorrect on any level.
I love that. That's very strong. I mean, people, you're right. They want to be Musk or Jobs. And, you're Matt, I'm Gabriel. And Musk didn't become Musk by saying, I want to be like Steve Jobs. He just did his own thing. So it's good to remind us that, because, a lot of people tend to forget. Matt, thank you so much for being here today. And I had such a blast. So cool what you're building. I wish you the very, very best of luck. I'll be following very closely. Is there a place for people who want to reach out to you, follow you personally, or AstroForge, or both?
Just email me, matt@astroforge.io. I'm always down to talk to founders and help anybody out.
That's brilliant. Thank you again for being on the show, Matt. I had a great time. It was awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Gabriel. Have a great day.
You too. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe for more conversations like this. And please don't forget to rate us and leave a great review on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time on the Lobster Talks, stay bold, stay curious, and remember, those big ideas start somewhere.